Welcome back to Hannity. So in a time when one of our closest allies needs us the most, the White House appears to be turning its back on Israel. Now, the Jerusalem Post sums it up very well in this sentiment. Now, the title of a recent article in that paper reads, quote, "Candidly speaking, Obama is abandoning Israel." And they are not the only ones who feel that way. Joining me now is the former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren. Michael, good to see you. Thanks for being back on the program. You wrote an article yourself that I agree with in total. Or Israel must be permitted to crush Hamas. Why do you say that?
Good to be with you, Sean. Israel has to be allowed to crush Hamas. This is now the third round that Israel's had with Hamas in the last 6 years. We also had a round with Hezbollah, and it's always the same pattern. They fire thousands of rockets at us. We try to defend ourselves. We get branded by the world as war criminals, and we get a ceasefire slammed at us that ties our hands and enables the terrorists then to build up bigger rocket arsenals with longer range missiles, and then they choose the time when they fire again. And this not only endangers Israelis, it actually endangers Palestinians, because each round is more severe and more Palestinian civilians who are used as human shields by Hamas and by Hezbollah, more of them get killed and injured. Right. So we have to break this pattern once and for all.
Let me go to the Hamas charter, because the idea that there's any moral equivalence here is shocking to me. Now, it says Israel will exist, and this is right in the charter, and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it. Now, they're calling for the destruction in their charter of the State of Israel. We give this coalition government United States tax dollars, and I think that is a huge mistake. Are we, by pressuring Israel to pull back from breaking down their infrastructure and tunnels, are we, meaning the administration, John Kerry, Barack Obama, are they becoming the de facto supporters of Hamas? Because it seems like they are.
Well, for one thing, that charter calls not only for the destruction of Israel, Hamas actually promises to kill every Jew in the entire world. It's a genocidal organization. Extraordinary. It's racist and vicious and genocidal. And this week, American-trained Palestinian security forces on the West Bank actually guarded a Hamas demonstration in Nablus. So American taxpayers are also paying to guard Hamas demonstrators on the West Bank. It is not a very rational situation. The Obama administration today is engaged in negotiations with Israel, with other elements in the Middle East. Some of them are not viewed by Israel as very helpful. The Qataris and the Turks, certainly not. And there's talks about a ceasefire that will enable Israel to continue to eliminate the tunnels.
Hang on a second.
But
the
it's
Turkey
very
Prime Minister,
John.
Didn't he refer to Bibi as Hitler? And isn't Qatar financing a lot of? Or
worse than Hitler.
Worse than Hitler. And isn't Qatar, aren't they financing Hamas? Aren't they giving them money to buy the munitions?
They financed the rockets. They financed the tunnels. They basically financed this war. And not helpful, as I said before, not having them involved.
For the sake of my audience, let me try and put America in your shoes for just a second. Imagine if 2/3 of the American people were spending time in bomb shelters in the last month. Imagine that kids had underground bomb shelter playgrounds where the Israeli children are now playing because they can't play outside because the rockets only allow you 15 seconds to be safe. And imagine America was hit in its towns and cities with 3,000 rockets. Well, this is what the White House press secretary, Josh Earnest, said to Israel. And I wonder, does that mean he would handle a situation similar to what you're facing like this? This is what he said.
The Israelis need to do more to live up to the standards that they have set for themselves to ensure the safety of innocent civilians on both sides of that border, including Palestinian people. So it is apparent from the reports that we have seen about the civilian deaths that there is more that the Israeli military can and should do to account for the safety of Palestinian civilians.
Now, I want to play one other one. Jen Psaki over at the State Department. Listen to what she said that Israel needs to pull back. I want you to listen to this.
Israel, I think, we've long believed and still continue to believe that they have the right to defend themselves. And when you have indiscriminate rocket attacks threatening your people, when you have terrorists coming into tunnels, they have every right to do that. But at the same time, we've been calling for a ceasefire, as has the UN. This is what the Secretary's focused on, because the violence has reached a point where it needs to pause, it needs to stop, and we need to find a way to find a diplomatic solution.
If you don't destroy the tunnel system and the infrastructure, and if you don't destroy their rockets, you're going to be back there in 3 months, 6 months, or a year, are you not?
But first of all, let's go back to the White House spokesman. As a citizen of Israel, as a 30-year veteran of its army, as the father of 3 soldiers, I take strong exception to that remark that Israel's not doing enough. Israel is doing more than any army in military history to try to avoid civilian casualties. Israel drops hundreds of thousands of leaflets over
I have video of that,
where there's going to be combat.
As you're talking, continue talking. I'll show the video of Israel dropping those leaflets, and you drop it all over. And as I understand it, you even make calls and texts to the homes and areas that are about to be bombed. Is that not true?
And reconnaissance planes count the Palestinians leaving every house to try to get them out of this house. Now, the Israeli news reported today that 20 Palestinians in the West Bank were shot dead by Hamas for trying to protest against the war. Hamas dragged out another 30 Palestinians today and shot them summarily, accusing them of collaborating with Israel. One of those 50 people shot to death by Hamas today are considered among the casualties. And the White House talks about published reports indicate that Israel could have done more to reduce casualties. I wonder what reports they're referring to. Are they referring to reports by Al Jazeera? Are they referring to reports by the United Nations that brought us a couple of years old the Goldstone report, which accused Israel of war crimes, and then only to have all of those accusations disproved, and even Judge Goldstone apologized for it? What published reports?
But I go back,
I'd like to know.
But Michael, Ambassador, I go back and I say, if these were 3,000 rockets in American towns and cities, if this was 2/3 of the American population, that would be 200 million people in bomb shelters.
Exactly.
Are we saying that we wouldn't knock out the infrastructure of the enemies that were attacking us? That raises a serious question. Well, that raises a serious question from my perspective about moral clarity and what I would call moral corruption if we don't see who's right and who's wrong here.
Please understand that what's going on in Gaza, about an hour from here, there are about 70,000 Israelis. Most of them are reservists who have left their homes, their families, their jobs. They've gotten into uniforms. They've signed on to guns, something like the Minutemen in the American Revolution. They've gone out to fight for our homes. You know, in America, there's been a lot of war weariness. I certainly was witness to it when I was in Washington for nearly 5 years, and that was after a decade or more of war in Iraq and Afghanistan. We've been at war for 66 years here without a minute of let-up, and war weariness is not an option for us. We can't bring our troops home. Our troops are home.
They're
fighting on our soil. They're fighting for our housing.
But
understand this.
Their own charter calls for your destruction. How could you not fight back?
But it's even more than that, Sean. What Israel is fighting an hour south of where I'm talking to now is not just for Israel's safety. It's for safety of you, for the United States. Hamas is no different than Al-Qaeda. Hamas is no different than ISIS and Nusra. It's the same radical jihadist theology that seeks to destroy not just Israel. Israel's just a stepping stone on the route to destroying the West. So you've got 70,000 Israelis tonight fighting for you. And make no mistake about it. And that's why Israel has to win this round. We've got to break that cycle. We've got to crush Hamas, and we've got to create a new status quo down there.
If the United States does not stand with Israel, it is evidence of deep moral corruption, in my view. Michael, thank you for being with us.